We're now joined by Taylor McHargue, ESPN, CBS college football analyst. Color analyst joins us on 365 Sports. And Taylor, thanks for your time. So what do you think is going on with Oklahoma's offense that seems to just not have much rhyme or reason?
That's a great question. The game 2 weeks ago against Houston, I went back and watched a good amount of that tape, and there is something missing with communication on the simple things. This is not in my opinion, I don't think this is a skill issue. There's still plenty of talent on that side of the ball, but you've had issues, even going back to the Temple game, but especially the last 2 weeks, procedure issues, bringing guys in motion where they're banging into the running back. You're not synced up. There's not great timing. Some of that is having an inexperienced quarterback, but Jackson Arnold played some last year, has obviously had a couple of games under his belt this year. They need to figure it out in a hurry because not only do they have the showdown this week, but if you just look down their schedule through the next few weeks, they have a much more difficult draw in SEC play than Texas did in their first year in the SEC. But to me, a lot of it is things that you would have hoped by now that you would have sorted out in practice.
Taylor, you did a game last week, and I've just blanked on it that I watched. Which one did you do last week? I had a question about it, and I blanked.
I had Western Michigan and Bethune-Cookman, so I would be surprised if you watched it last week.
Oh, no, that was a 2 weeks ago game. Never mind. I had old notes.
Yeah.
Old notes. What are your thoughts on the University of Texas and the way that they have completely handled their business this year, and then compared to Georgia, who did it first and then really had a dud against Kentucky this last week?
You know, when I watch Texas, it just looks like a team that's very focused, right? I mean, they look like a team that understands that they've got a real opportunity here with a ton of production that's come back. They did a good job in the portal with guys that are having impact right now. And then they're led by, and I was going to say Quinn Ewers, but even when Arch Manning steps in, they've got probably the deepest quarterback room in the country. The thing that I loved this week that I heard that Coach Sarkisian, he showed his team the Northern Illinois and Notre Dame clips. He showed them, look what happens if you don't focus and take care of your business. You go to A&M and get a huge win to open the season, and then you lose to a MAC team in Northern Illinois at home. And I think you saw them come out against UTSA and throttle down the entire game. And even when Arch Manning came in, they didn't miss a beat. That, to me, is really what jumps out about Texas right now.
What jumped out to you about Arch Manning?
Just that he was on time. Some of the throws that he made, Quinn Ewers makes the same throw, right? The long touchdown, it was like 70-something yards. The guy's running wide open. He's 20 yards in the clear. But there were some other timing routes and just being in rhythm that a lot of times your young quarterbacks, regardless of how talented they are, it's difficult to find that rhythm. And I thought it was great that he gets in and has the long run where it gets his legs underneath him, and he found a rhythm really for pretty quickly in that game. And it just looked like a guy that he's got command of what they're trying to do on offense. I didn't think UTSA on the other side, they're in a rebuilding year. They lost so much production from a year ago. So that's not the UTSA that Texas has seen previously. But still, regardless of who you're playing on the other side, look at how Michigan, look at their issues. I have Arkansas State and Iowa State this week. Arkansas State forces 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions against Michigan. So it doesn't matter who your opponent is on the other side. If you're not playing sound quarterback play, you can have turnovers and have issues. And I thought Arch Manning stepped in and, again, clean and on time and just has a command of what they're doing on offense.
You know, Georgia had their game in Kentucky, and obviously very rough. Won the game, though. They figured it out. They seem like they have one of these every year. I don't know if it's at this time of the year, but sometimes in that. So, but Kentucky plays really good defense. But 13-12, is there something missing from Georgia, or is that a credit to what Coach Stoops in Kentucky's doing?
No, you said it exactly right. It seems like Georgia has at least one of these a year. And frankly, if you look around every season by the end of the year, regardless of who the team is, there's at least one game typically that you look back and say, man, what was that performance? And for Georgia, they're fortunate they got out of a good atmosphere in Lexington. and they got out of there with a win. Now, they looked really poor on offense. They didn't look there was no pop. The team speed that we're used to seeing and that physicality from Georgia just wasn't there on the offensive side. I'm convinced, and I've got no way to prove this, but I'm convinced that the off-the-field issues that they continue to have with reckless driving and the arrests and the speeding tickets and traffic tickets, having an incident game week where it's back in the headlines right before you go play an SEC game on the road, convinced that that had something to do with just a hangover and not coming out and handling the business that we've kind of expected from Georgia. But again, if you're Kirby Smart, you're obviously thankful that they got out of there with a win, and you're thankful that it happened in league play early in the year where now you've got your guys' attention. You say, look, it doesn't matter what last year's team accomplished. This is this year, and if you don't take care of business in this league, you can lose to anybody in the SEC.
Taylor, what would you do about that if you're Kirby Smart? Because whatever they're doing is not working.
You wonder at what point does the university step in and it goes away from, and I've wondered this for a while now, at what point does it go beyond what your football coach wants to do with the team and what does your administration want to do with the team? There's such a microscope. This team is under such a microscope, and there's a focus on what these guys is happening to them off the field. At some point, you have to wonder if there's another incident that it's just an immediate, you're off the team, and it doesn't matter who it is. You're pulling scholarships, you're suspending players, you're doing things that if this was an isolated incident, if a guy at fill-in-the-blank school wherever in the country gets arrested for going 30 miles over the speed limit or 40 miles over the speed limit and it's one time, well, you don't kick that guy off the team. But if it's the however many times this has happened at Georgia and it happens again, knowing all the attention you have on you, you've got a real problem that just doesn't seem like it's getting fixed. And again, at what point does the university step in and say, okay, we're going to handle discipline moving forward?
Have you had much chance to get your eyes on John Mateer and Wazoo?
Very little, but I have them in a few weeks at San Diego State and really fired up for that game. I've watched some of their performance against Texas Tech, and man, they brought the fight to Texas Tech just from a team perspective. But that game specifically, I thought they looked really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he's a lot of fun to watch. Not the best passer in the world, but just his ability to run around really makes a difference. Another guy who can run around and make a big difference, but he's gotten better and better as a passer is Jalen Milroe. We've talked a lot about him. Taylor, he's putting up big numbers. He's also not having to play all of the game just yet. We know that's going to change here soon, but what have you liked or otherwise had an opinion on in terms of seeing him in this new offense?
Well, I think what Alabama was able to do in the portal with the offensive line, I think is really impressive. They are mauling people right now, and they did the same thing when they went up to Madison. Regardless of what happened with Tyler Van Dyke going down, I don't think that game was ever going to be close. And for Jalen Milroe, knowing what he is and who he is as a player, there's a different sense of confidence where if you remember last year, they had to go they lose to Texas and then against South Florida, they rotate the two backups and basically come to the realization he is the guy. Jalen Milroe is our best chance to win. And now it feels like obviously that's in the past and there's a different level of confidence. And I like from a scheme perspective, they are doing a good job playing to his strengths. There's obviously going to be quarterback run game is a huge part of his game. And if the offensive line continues to play the way that they've looked the first couple of weeks of the season, especially against Wisconsin, they were dominating it's a Big Ten, a good Big Ten front on the other side. And in the trenches, it was not even close. They were a really strong unit. And I think they play that way regardless of who they have coming in league play, which a big one coming up against Georgia. That's going to be, I think that's one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country. I think they're right there next to Ohio State.
Taylor, Baylor got a win against Air Force. They finally kind of stopped turning it over, first of all, in the second half, and eventually just dominated the game. But Sawyer Robertson got the start. Jaquan Finn was in a sling. He's back to practice, according to Dave Aranda, when we discussed it with him on Monday. If you were Dave Aranda and you win the game, and, of course, the offense looked pretty good other than the turnovers, what would you do this week at Colorado at quarterback?
Yeah, I think you have to go with the hot hand. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to move on from Sawyer Robinson right now. Air Force and you guys saw this firsthand. I had them 2 weeks ago. I think, Paul, that may have been the game you were asking about because I had Air Force at San Jose State. Air Force is struggling on offense. They're struggling to find an identity. For Baylor fans, a big win against a team that their defense is not that bad, Air Force, but on the offensive side, that may be the worst offense that Baylor faces all season. But specific to quarterback play, Sawyer Robertson, you go with the hot hand, and you've got somebody in DeQuan Finn behind him that if you're in a sling 1 week, it probably helps you out to have at least one more week off. But again, from the outside looking in, that is, I would not rock the boat. Leave him in. And this is a game going to Colorado. I think Baylor should win this game. Colorado's still struggling to run the football. And if I'm Baylor, you sell out and make Colorado one-dimensional. Dare them to run the football. You could play a light box. And I think that's going to be the key to that game is on the defensive side for Baylor.
How difficult, though, is it for Baylor, a team that has some speed and they've got some guys that are faster and stronger than a year ago, but that's where Colorado can maybe get them in a hole is they've got guys who can just make a play out of nothing in Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn and LaShawnte Western, these guys on offense.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Their weapons that they have are on the perimeter. The issue that Colorado has is not an offensive line that's designed for run blocking. And you go back a couple weeks ago to Nebraska, and I know that that's a really good front in Nebraska, but I think it was less than 10 yards on the ground that they ended up coming out of there with. For Baylor, dare them to throw the football consistently on a down-to-down basis. And it's a little bit of bend but don't break because some of that is like you're talking about, you don't want to get beat over the top. You don't want to give up the chunk plays. So it's a lot of you're fine with the underneath completions, rally to the football, try to create some second and third and longs and get them in spots where you can get you in predictable downs. You can tee off and get off the field because to this point, Colorado has just not proven that they are willing to run the football on early downs. So knowing that, drop 8, play coverage, a lot of soft secondary. I think that's what Colorado is going to get the rest of the season.
Do you feel like that they can change who they are at all, or are they just going to have to wing it around and let Shadur find the weapons and just hope they don't give up a lot of points?
No, I think they are who they are. And from a personnel standpoint, it doesn't matter who they play the rest of the way this season. They are not going to be able to line up and run the by 40 times. It's just not going to happen. And so you're asking that offense, Shadur Sanders, to throw it 40 to 50 times a game and not turn the ball over, not get sacked. And teams that will get themselves in trouble when they have the ball, you talked about turnovers a minute ago, that's the way that you get in the hole to Colorado, and it's difficult to come back. But if you play sound on the offensive side and don't turn the ball over, you're going to be in the game for the most part because, again, Colorado, I think, is going to be one-dimensional the rest of the season. And selling out to make them, dare them to run the football, that's going to be the recipe for every team that faces Colorado the rest of the season.
Taylor, thank you. As always, good luck with what you have with both ESPN and CBS television. College football analyst, color analyst with us on 365 Sports.